share my screen so you can get ready to admit them.
I did. Okay, good morning or good afternoon. I'm sorry. I want to thank you guys for joining us. I'm Dr. Jennifer Smith. And before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. If you've not already done so, please be sure to mute your microphone so it will minimize the noise in the background during the capstone presentation. For all attendees who would like CE credit for this presentation, you must have registered via Training Institute. You will receive a follow-up email after the session that gives you directions on retrieving CEs. It will show you how to print those off. The presentation will last approximately 60 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of question and answers. So now I would like to take a moment to introduce Ms. Caitlin Warfield. Caitlin Marissa Warfield is a dedicated licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW, in Kentucky and a doctoral candidate at the University of Kentucky. Currently, she serves as an outpatient behavioral health therapist at an Appalachia Regional Healthcare Behavioral Health Clinic located in Hazard, Kentucky. Her clinical work fuels her passion for addressing mental health challenges within her community. Caitlin's doctoral research focuses on the pervasive impact of adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs, in rural Appalachia communities. Her work explores the intergenerational transmission of these experiences through learned behavior and cultural acceptance. Recognizing the critical shortage of adequately trained professionals and the long-standing challenges stemming from untreated ACEs, Caitlin's research aims to bridge this gap. Her research highlights the critical gap in literature and offers crucial insights for educating and preparing future social workers. By emphasizing culturally aware and trauma-informed interventions, Caitlin seeks to empower professionals to effectively support rural Appalachian individuals impacted by generational ACEs. Ms. Warfield, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you all for being here today for this important capstone presentation on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, in the unique context of rural Appalachia. The past 2 years have been filled with extensive research and dedication, and I hope this presentation ignites your curiosity and deepens your understanding of adverse childhood experiences and their impact on rural Appalachian communities. Thank you for your attention and your engagement. Today's agenda includes the following items: an acknowledgement and dedication, learning objectives, an overview of the capstone project, an introduction to adverse childhood experiences in rural Appalachia, and a presentation of 3 products: a systematic literature review, a conceptual paper, and a practice application paper. We will provide a brief overview of these 3 products and their key findings, identify the limitations of this capstone project, and explore the implications for social work practice in relation to administrative leadership, and conclude with recommendations. Before we delve into the details of this capstone project, I would like to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to those who have played a vital role in my journey to this point. Their unwavering support and encouragement have been instrumental in shaping the work I am about to present. To my husband, Jacob, my mother, Charlotte, and my mentor, Dr. Jennifer Smith, I would not be presenting this doctoral capstone product without each of you and your support on this journey. Each of you have pushed me to continue when I wanted to quit, encouraged me when I felt I could not do this, and brought me joy as a much-needed distraction. I would also like to thank my brother Ethan, my sister Morgan, and my nephews Wyatt and Walker. Spending time with you all has been difficult over the past 2 years, but each time we were together, you gave me the happiness and escape I needed from school. I also want to thank my church family who have prayed for me through this doctoral journey. In this presentation, we will delve into our key learning objectives. By the conclusion of this presentation, I aspire for you to feel inspired and equipped with the knowledge to positively impact the lives of individuals in rural Appalachian communities that are grappling with the challenges associated with adverse childhood experiences. Together, we can explore meaningful pathways to foster resilience and healing in these underserved areas. Specifically, the learning objectives are number one, participants will be able to identify the prevalence of ACEs and their impact on social issues in rural Appalachian communities. Number two, participants will be able to identify how ACEs have been passed down generationally and culturally accepted in rural Appalachian communities, and the need for new proposed cultural principles. Number three, participants will be able to identify new proposed practice to provide culturally aware interventions for rural Appalachians who have experienced generational ACEs. First, I will provide a general overview of what will be included in the capstone presentation. Today's discussion will focus on adverse childhood experiences in rural Appalachian communities. These communities face significant challenges due to ongoing untreated generational ACEs, which contribute to ongoing social issues such as high rates of substance use, mental health disorders, and persistent economic distress. These social issues cause and are caused by cultural acceptance of ACEs and a lack of available resources to intervene properly. As a result, harmful behavioral patterns and coping mechanisms are passed down through families without appropriate intervention. This capstone project addresses the cycle of generational ACEs in rural Appalachia by presenting a series of papers, a systematic literature review, a conceptual paper, and a practice application paper. Each of these papers centers on the primary topic of ACEs in rural Appalachia, and they work together to enhance our understanding of how ACEs impact these communities, how they have been transmitted generationally, and the cultural acceptance surrounding them. Furthermore, the project examines the barriers that hinder intervention, such as cultural stigma, mistrust of outsiders, mental health stigma, and ongoing social issues and a lack of resources. This presentation will also include practice ideas for social workers to effectively address generational adverse childhood experiences and in a culturally aware and trauma-informed manner. Together, these components highlight the generational nature of ACEs within rural Appalachia and provide a deeper understanding of how these ongoing social issues cause and are caused by ACEs. Through this work, this capstone project seeks to foster a more informed and proactive social work community dedicated to breaking the cycle of generational ACEs and promoting culturally informed interventions. So, what are adverse childhood experiences? Adverse childhood experiences encompass a range of negative or traumatic events that individuals may experience during their childhood or adolescence. Encountering these distressing experiences can profoundly increase a person's risk of facing significant health problems later in life. ACEs are the result of various adverse experiences, including exposure to substance abuse within the family, the trauma of parental separation, pervasive mental health disorders, the strains of poverty and neglect, and various forms of abuse, whether physical, emotional, or sexual. The concept of ACEs gained prominence in 1998 during a pivotal study conducted at a weight loss clinic. Researchers noted an alarming pattern of adverse experiences among their clients during their younger years. This observation sparked a more extensive investigation among the clinic's clientele. Initially, the study of ACEs was met with skepticism from medical professionals who questioned the validity of the findings, and many argued that the hypothesis might serve as an excuse for unhealthy eating habits among overweight individuals. Nevertheless, the researchers persevered, conducting the study, which ultimately unveiled a compelling link between ACEs and a heightened risk for both mental and physical health disorders. Since the groundbreaking research, a wealth of literature has unfolded, shedding light on ACEs as a growing concern in the United States. The impact of these adverse experiences extends beyond individuals' lives. continuing to resonate with through generations and significantly influencing countless of individuals' physical and mental well-being. Individuals who have endured ACEs face a significantly elevated risk of developing a range of health complications, both mental and physical. These complications can manifest as anxiety, persistent depression, suicidal thoughts, and substance use disorders. Furthermore, the impact of ACEs may contribute to obesity, heart disease, risky sexual behaviors, and sexually transmitted diseases, and unhealthy eating patterns, as highlighted by the research of Folletti and others in 1998. Studies reveal that approximately 64% of adults who have experienced at least one ACE before the age of 18 and over 17% in encountering 4 or more ACEs during their childhood. An ACE assessment. So how do they assess for ACEs? The ACE assessment tool is a validated tool that mental health professionals or medical providers can use to provide early detection of common childhood traumas. The ACE questionnaire is quick and convenient, involving 10 questions assessing for any forms of abuse, whether physical, sexual, emotional, etc. It also assesses for exposure to domestic violence, substance use, mental health disorders, parental separation, parental incarceration, or neglect. These questions are to be asked individually to both age-appropriate children, approximately 12 and older or based on emotional maturity, and their parents or caregivers, to provide both parent and child perspectives. Despite the ease of this 10-question assessment, with yes or no answers that can be completed by both the parent and the child, most medical providers do not use this tool as part of their treatment plan. Often, this is due to medical providers feeling unprepared to handle the emotional fallout of asking questions concerning psychosocial well-being or the complications of mental health referrals. Failure to conduct an ACE assessment contributes to a lack of mental health referrals and leaves many children in a toxic environment with no support and an increased risk for health problems. Taking approximately 5 minutes to ask these important questions or allow clients to complete the forms themselves could make the difference between poor health outcomes and a long, happy, healthy life. The ACEs in rural Appalachia. ACEs are profoundly impacting generations of children and adolescents in rural Appalachian communities, where many young individuals often lack access to crucial interventions that could break the cycle of trauma for future generations. The urgency for additional research is apparent, as these rural communities face alarmingly high rates of adverse health outcomes linked to ACEs. A study by Yun and others in 2022 revealed that 55.4% of individuals report experiencing at least one ACE, and 1 in 5 adolescents in these rural regions experience ACEs. The statistics surrounding health issues in these rural communities are striking due to the prevalence of ACEs. As we learned in previous slides, ACEs cause an increased risk for poor health outcomes. Rates of obesity, substance abuse, heart disease, stroke, cancer, and illness-related deaths are among the highest in the nation, with statistics for Appalachian residents being a staggering 37% higher than the national average. Understanding these complexities is vital for developing effective interventions and support systems in these communities. Despite these staggering statistics, the extensive body of ACE research has very few studies conducted in rural Appalachian communities, or on how ACEs have been passed down generationally in these close-knit communities, contributing to these elevated numbers. Some social issues. Health outcomes are not the only elevated statistic in rural Appalachia caused by ACEs. As mentioned on the previous slide, social issues plaguing rural Appalachian communities are complex and deeply intertwined with ACEs, being a cause and the result of substance use, mental health disorders, and economic distress. Experiencing even a single ACE significantly elevates the risk of developing substance use disorders, mental health disorders, and facing economic distress. The relationship between ACEs and these social issues is much like a tree. ACEs are the root cause of these social issues and contribute to their widespread prevalence in rural Appalachia communities, thanks to the environment that nurtures the growth of ACEs through cultural acceptance. The cultural acceptance of ACEs and these social issues combined with a widespread stigma surrounding mental health treatment further perpetuates the challenges these communities face. Further contributing to the continued spread of ACEs and their resulting social issues is the lack of resources and culturally aware interventions. Just as trees stand strong for years, research shows that ACEs can last for generations as well. Children raised in environments where substance abuse, mental health disorders, and economic distress are prevalent are often directly impacted by the negative experiences associated with them. They adopt these unhealthy behavioral patterns as the norms through social and behavioral learning, giving a whole new meaning to the phrase that the apple does not fall far from the tree. For example, a child who witnesses their parents engaging in substance misuse may not only experience ACEs, but also learn to view substance use as an acceptable coping mechanism to deal with their stress. As they grow into adulthood, these individuals may inadvertently expose their own children to the same negative environment. This creates a cycle where poor health outcomes and behavioral issues are inherited, continuing the cycle of generational ACEs and their resulting social issues. To show how ACEs have contributed to these social issues, one can simply look at the research. Studies show that individuals diagnosed with a substance use disorder are 85 to 100% more likely to have experienced ACEs. Additionally, youth with at least one ACE are nearly twice as likely to experience depression or anxiety, and they face a staggering five-fold increase in the risk for developing a substance use disorder compared to the peers who have not experienced ACEs. Moreover, adults with ACEs often find themselves navigating economic distress. Research shows that ACEs can significantly hinder a child's educational journey, resulting in increased absenteeism, elevated rates of expulsion, and generally poorer academic performance, which can lead to fewer job opportunities in adulthood. Alarmingly, individuals who encounter multiple ACEs report an average annual income of nearly $8,000 less than those who have not experienced ACEs. Notably, a mere 13% of individuals with four or more ACEs earn $75,000 or more annually. I could go on about how ACEs increase an individual's risk for substance use, mental health disorders, or economic distress, and vice versa. Still, the overall point is to highlight that a decrease in ACEs would ultimately decrease the prevalence of these social issues in rural Appalachian communities. So I'd like to take a moment to do a poll. Um, if you do not see this poll on your screen, then please drop into the chat to participate in this. I'll give everyone a moment to get that answered. Okay. So I'd like to share the results with you all. So 90% of participants in this presentation today said yes to the question, have you ever heard that people from rural Appalachia or Kentucky marry their cousins? Thank you all for participating. Okay. Okay. The, the previous video highlighted the cultural stigma surrounding rural Appalachian communities. When most people think of rural Appalachia, they think of conditions shown in the video. These communities are often portrayed as uneducated, hillbilly, redneck, and backwoods people who can't speak plainly and marry their cousins and chew tobacco. While this stereotype might be true for a very small population of individuals, this grossly misrepresents the majority of rural Appalachians who find such characterizations deeply insulting. This negative perception of rural Appalachia not only discourages outsiders from seeking employment in these communities, but also creates cultural barriers that hinder mental health treatment. A large portion of medical and mental health providers working in rural Appalachian communities are people who have been recruited to work here and do not understand the culture of the community. Distrust in healthcare professionals frequently obstructs the development of a therapeutic relationship and creates unnecessary barriers to treatment. Nobody wants to go talk to a medical or mental health professional who is going to look down on you or your way of living or assume that you are uneducated because of your accent. Working with this population requires cultural awareness and sensitivity to how rural Appalachians have been stigmatized in the media for decades. Understanding this population's history can enhance cultural comprehension of the underlying factors that contribute to generational ACEs and help break their cycle. Appalachian culture has often been described as clannish due to the significant influence of Scottish immigrants and the fierce sense of independence among the Appalachian people. The community's fear of outside influences due to historic manipulation from pill mills, carpetbaggers, and a negative portrayal in the media has further strengthened the cultural belief in self-reliance and that outsiders cannot be trusted. This dynamic has resulted in many community members avoiding mental health resources, thereby perpetuating cycles of ACEs. Rural Appalachian residents typically take pride in their autonomy and resilience, making do with what they can achieve independently. As a result, for many, asking for help is viewed as a shameful experience. This fierce independence often stands in the way of treatment, as many clients feel reluctant to seek assistance or fear being perceived as weak for needing help. Seeking mental health treatment is sometimes seen as a character flaw and a reflection of a lack of spiritual faith. Additionally, the small town dynamic where everyone knows everyone can hinder treatment. Clients may know their providers or fear being seen by acquaintances when attending their therapy sessions. Another cultural barrier is the strong emphasis on family values. Rural Appalachian residents prioritize caring for their family members, which can propose or pose challenges for mental health treatment. Not only must the client view therapy as a beneficial intervention, but their family members must also share this perspective. Family opposition and negative perceptions of seeking treatment can lead clients to withdraw from therapy. Furthermore, ACE reporting often requires to discuss family dynamics, which can feel like placing blame on family members of for their adverse experiences, directly contradicting what these rural Appalachians have been taught. These family dynamics may be codependent and toxic, complicating the client's efforts when seeking mental health treatment and breaking generational cycles of ACEs. Okay, I'd like to take a moment just to do another poll. Again, if you don't see this poll on your screen, just drop into the chat for participation. Just give everyone a moment to participate. Thank you all for participating. Just want to share these results with you. Okay, so 89% of who is here for the presentation today said yes to, would you know what a client is referring to if a client said way back yonder in the head of the holler? Thank you for your participation with this. Okay. So hollers in rural Appalachia. Many people do not know what a holler is, but for rural Appalachians, a holler is home. Where we live, we have unique names, just as unique as the people who live there. We do not live in the suburbs or on blocks, streets, or neighborhoods. Instead, we live in hollers on branches, creeks, forks, and licks. For example, some local names of hollers where I live are Hill for Certain, Devil's Jump, Twist and Sourwood, Granny's Branch, Rush Creek, Bob Fork, Bear Branch, Fish Trap, Thousand Sticks, Bullskin, Horses Creek, and Uses Creek. Now, I know that's spelled Ulysses, but I assure you it's pronounced Uses Creek. It is essential to train mental health providers to understand these cultural barriers and be sensitive to clients' daily lives and the significance of living in a close-knit rural community. This awareness is critical for alleviating the ongoing impacts of ACEs affecting the rural population through the building of therapeutic rapport. So on to the capstone products. Now that we have identified what ACEs are, how they are caused and what they cause, and how they are assessed, and some of the barriers that hinder treatment, let's move on to these capstone products. This capstone presents an overview of 3 key papers: the systematic literature review, the conceptual paper, and the practice application paper. Each of these comprehensive works delves into the critical issue of adverse childhood experiences in rural Appalachian communities. Together, they seek to illuminate and address these interconnected social challenges of substance use, mental health disorders, and economic distress that plague these areas. Through an intense examination of the literature and practice applications, this research aims to contribute meaningfully to understanding and mitigating the impacts of ACEs on vulnerable populations such as rural Appalachians. The systematic literature review endeavors to illuminate the literature surrounding adverse childhood experiences in rural Appalachian communities. The central research question guiding this literature review is how can the cultural implications and generational nature of ACEs contribute to the ever-growing social issues and continuation of ACEs in rural Appalachian communities? Despite the existence of a notable amount of literature addressing ACEs, few studies look at rural Appalachia as a specific population, and even few study the generational nature of ACEs through cultural acceptance. This systematic literature review followed strict procedures and search strategies to collect and disseminate the data discovered. Search strategies included utilizing various databases such as Academic Search Complete, Psychology and Behavioral Sciences Collection, APA PsycInfo, Social Work Abstracts, Sociological Collection, Health and Psychosocial Instruments, America History and Life, and Medline. The key search terms were adverse childhood experiences, substance use, mental health, economic distress, low income, Appalachia, and rural. Initially, 60 articles were identified for potential inclusion. Through the rigorous screening and selection process that involved a careful review of article titles, evaluation of their peer-reviewed status, and consideration of their publication date, ultimately, this process resulted in the selection of 5 articles that were relevant to the research question at hand. The findings of this review do justify the research question, revealing that cultural implications and the generational nature of ACEs in rural Appalachian communities significantly contribute to a widening array of social issues. So, just to discuss some of the key findings, these comprehensive findings from the systematic literature review reveal the prevalence of ACEs in rural Appalachian communities is similar to that found in urban areas. However, certain demographics within these communities, specifically low-income households and families with caregivers who themselves have endured ACEs, and those living in a dysfunctional family environment exhibit a significantly greater likelihood of experiencing repeated trauma. This repeated trauma is closely correlated with a heightened risk of ACEs in these rural settings. Moreover, the reviewed literature consistently highlights a unique and deeply rooted culture that often hinders mental health intervention strategies and therapeutic approaches. The challenge not only lies in addressing the immediate effects of ACEs, but also in navigating the complex cultural landscape that shapes experiences and responses of individuals in these communities. Ultimately, the systematic literature review illuminates the increased rate of experiencing ACEs if your parent or caregiver has also experienced ACEs, and an increased likelihood of experiencing ACEs if you live in a low-income or dysfunctional household in rural Appalachia, and highlights the need for further research within this community. The conceptual paper. The aim of this conceptual paper is to delve into the underlying causes of ACEs within rural Appalachian communities through a social and behavioral theoretic framework. It seeks to uncover the cultural barriers that shape ACEs and hinder treatment and propose a new set of cultural principles as the missing piece in this complex puzzle that can be integrated with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration Trauma Informed Care Guideline. It is imperative to support individuals from rural Appalachia who have endured ACEs through a holistic lens that appreciates their rich culture and lived experiences. The ultimate goal is to alleviate mental or elevate mental health treatment for this unique population that is culturally aware and trauma informed. The newly conceptualized cultural principles are indispensable for mental health providers striving to build genuine connections with their clients without inadvertently re victimizing them. Once these principles are thoroughly understood and adequately applied, mental health professionals can utilize behavioral therapy as a powerful tool to reshape clients' behaviors, ultimately preventing the transmission of ACEs to future generations and facilitating the healing of social issues throughout rural Appalachia. It is the ethical duty of social workers and healthcare providers to fight against the root causes of social issues and the spread of ACEs. While it is undoubtedly challenging to unravel the cultural acceptance keeping Appalachians quiet and keeping to themselves, this process of change must begin somewhere. The conceptual paper employs a social and behavioral theoretical framework to explain how ACEs have been passed down through generations. Social and behavioral learning theory, developed by influential psychologists, emphasizes how behaviors are learned from the environment. Ivan Pavlov's classical conditioning and B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning laid the groundwork for understanding these learned behaviors, while Albert Bandura's work on modeling observed behavior is particularly significant as well. For instance, Bandura's experiments showed that children imitate aggressive behaviors they observe in adults. This theory posits that children learn behaviors from watching their parents, creating a cycle of behavior across generations. For example, children raised by parents who become physically aggressive when their spouse with their spouse when they are stressed may internalize these behaviors and replicate them. Environments such as multi-generational households or communities that normalize ACEs increase children's likelihood of learned behavioral patterns because they see these behaviors demonstrated more often. In rural Appalachia, living in a holler is common, in which most people within the holler are related. This holler life phenomenon contributes to the negative behavioral patterns being socially learned and cultural acceptance of ACEs being passed down through generations. So just to touch on some of the conceptual paper key findings, the conceptual paper highlights that rural Appalachian communities are at a higher risk for experiencing generational adverse childhood experiences. This risk is worsened by the region's history of significant community trauma and a notable lack of effective mental health interventions. In these communities, ACEs often go untreated and they are poorly addressed, largely to a general lack of cultural sensitivity among mental health providers and the public. Barriers to mental health treatment include limited access to services. This is partly due to the geographic isolation and economic hardship in the region, as well as deeply ingrained cultural attitudes that discourage individuals from seeking help. To address these cultural barriers, the paper proposes new cultural principles specifically designed for rural Appalachia to be implemented alongside the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's trauma-informed care framework. This ensures that mental health professionals are not only skilled in therapeutic techniques, but also sensitive to their clients' cultural context. This holistic approach is vital for breaking the cycle of generational ACEs and fostering resilience within these communities. The proposed cultural principles for guiding practice are designed for working with rural Appalachians who have experienced generational ACEs. Number one, respectful communication. Understand the unique language and dialect to promote respectful communication without stigmatizing the client further, as the media has often insulted the population's intelligence and made fun of the way they speak. Number two, family and community importance. Recognize the collective clannish nature of holler life and the importance of family ties that are present due to historical influence of Native American, Scottish, and Irish settlers in the region. Number three, a reluctance to seek help. Empathize with the nature of the population's reluctance to seek help due to the historical influences that have led to a mistrust of outsiders, strong religious beliefs, and a self stigma that views asking help as weakness. Number four, financial hardship. Understand the economic stressors as the community has suffered multiple historical impacts from coal mines being shut down and natural disasters such as mass flooding, and recognize that the population takes pride in their homes and their livelihoods, no matter the financial value. And number five, respect and courtesy. Understand the importance of mutual respect and courtesy over status, credentials, or education, as many rural Appalachian clients will stop services if they perceive that the provider believes that they are of a higher class, better in some way, or more intelligent than them. So, understanding the historical context that has shaped the cultural experiences of rural Appalachian residents can aid social workers and mental health providers in establishing a therapeutic rapport with their clients. It may require significant time building this rapport, often involving casual conversations or front porch talk about everyday lives and experiences. It is crucial to challenge typical stereotypes associated with rural Appalachian people, such as being labeled as poor, backwood, redneck, hillbilly, or associated with the Hatfields and the McCoys. These cultural principles align closely with SAMHSA's trauma-informed care principles: safety, trustworthiness, transparency, peer support, collaboration, mutuality, environment, and choice, and addressing cultural, historical, and gender issues. The practice application paper for this capstone project serves as a strategic roadmap for fostering meaningful change. It delves into the unmet needs within current research while illuminating effective interventions specifically designed for rural Appalachian communities grappling with the impact of ACEs. This paper outlines a series of actionable steps aimed at three primary levels of social work practice: macro, meso, and micro. The overall goal is to disrupt the cycle of generational ACEs, encourage vital conversations that confront and challenge cultural norms that contribute to ACEs, and spark change in rural Appalachia that can transform lives and foster resilience within these communities. So the key findings of the practice application paper are these actionable steps as outlined. Number one, increasing public awareness of generational ACEs. This capstone project hopes to launch a awareness campaign to dismantle the cultural stigma surrounding mental health treatment. This initiative will utilize local news stations throughout Central Appalachia and various social media platforms. The goal is to provide critical information about ACEs, highlight their lasting generational impacts, and promote available resources for support and treatment. Number two, training medical providers. To ensure a comprehensive approach to care, a workshop was developed for medical providers to undergo training focused on the effective use of ACE assessments during primary care visits. This essential training will align with the best practices as outlined by Watson 2019, and foster an environment of continuous learning and improvement. Number 3, advocating for referrals to mental health services. To streamline access to mental health support, medical providers will also be informed through the workshop about mental health services that are available in their area, including telehealth services. By equipping them with this knowledge, we aim to facilitate proactive referrals, thereby ensuring that patients receive the timely and necessary treatment they require. And number 4, training mental health professionals in cultural competency. The initiative will extend to mental health professionals who will receive training designed to cultivate cultural competency based on the principles outlined in the conceptual paper section of this presentation. This training seeks to strengthen therapeutic rapport, allowing professionals to better understand and address the unique behavioral patterns and cultural contexts of their clients. These thoughtfully crafted steps aim to elevate awareness, enhance professional training, and expand access to mental health services throughout the region, ultimately fostering a healthier community and breaking the cycle of generational ACEs. This capstone project has several limitations that need to be discussed. It examines generational ACEs through a social and behavioral lens. Although social learning and behavioral interventions are among the most extensively studied approaches in literature, and this is due to the controllability of the research outcomes in behavioral therapies and the scientific methods available to measure these outcomes through evidence-based practices and valid instruments. These frameworks are not without flaws, though. Since their rise to prominence, social learning and behavioral theories have profoundly influenced our understanding of human development in social contexts, highlighting that people acquire new behaviors and information by observing others. And while social learning and behavioral interventions are well researched, they can still have flaws. Furthermore, there is limited research focused on rural Appalachian communities to support the findings of this capstone project. The systematic literature review was conducted by a single doctoral candidate rather than a research team, as most systematic literature reviews are. As a result, there are concerns about potential bias in the findings due to the contribution of only one individual. So, implications for practice. Breaking the adverse childhood experiences cycle is challenging. Nevertheless, many individuals have successfully shown resilience in the face of adversity and created a healthier environment for their children compared to their own upbringing. Just as the impact of ACEs often begins with one ancestor, breaking the cycle also starts with a single person. Social workers now have a structured framework of practical interventions designed for generationally and culturally accepted ACEs in rural Appalachian communities that is applicable at every level of social work practice, macro, meso, and micro. This framework can help reduce the cultural stigma surrounding mental health in rural Appalachia, increase effective screening for ACEs in primary care settings, increase mental health referrals, and ultimately break generational cycles of culturally accepted ACEs in rural Appalachia. Additionally, by recognizing the various risks associated with ACEs, social workers can improve the quality of services they provide, ensuring these services are customized to meet the unique needs of their clients. Additionally, it is important to acknowledge how childhood development is intricately connected to the social context, which enhances the effectiveness of treatment plans. Understanding clients' cultural backgrounds and daily experiences is key to establishing a strong therapeutic rapport. This connection fosters trust and increases the likelihood of successful interventions and meaningful support. So, in conclusion, just as land, values, and home cooked recipes have been passed down from generation to generation, In the hills of rural Appalachia, so too have ACEs. ACEs have been generationally transmitted and culturally accepted, much like family traditions, in these rich and somewhat isolated communities. The prevalence of ACEs in these resource-stricken areas is more pronounced than many of the accents spoken by individuals who live there. Just as coal in Appalachia runs deep, so do the traumatic family histories of rural Appalachians who have ACEs. Physical and mental abuse, substance use, and economic struggles did not originate with the current individual's branch of the family tree. These adverse experiences began long before they came along. The vicious cycle of ACEs often started with their parents, grandparents, or even great grandparents, and was passed down through the generations due to socially learned behavioral patterns and a cultural acceptance. Without cultural awareness and understanding of generational ACEs in rural Appalachia, mental health interventions become chaotic and unsuccessful, and mental health professionals are left feeling much like a flock of sheep without a shepherd, wandering without direction. To effectively address these challenges, social workers and healthcare providers must understand the root causes of social issues in the community, which are generational ACEs. These proposed practice interventions must be implemented to foster positive change and break the vicious cycle of generational ACEs from being passed down like family heirlooms in these culturally rich, poverty stricken, resource deprived, rural Appalachian communities. Here is a list of references for the information that was included in this presentation today. I appreciate each of your time and your attention throughout this presentation. I will now turn it back over to Dr. Jennifer Smith to open the session up for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. We will now open up for questions. If you have a question, just please, you can raise your hand if you would like to ask one, or if you don't want to ask it verbally, you can drop it into the chat, and Caitlin, I will help you monitor the chat for any questions that we have. Okay, Joni.
Good afternoon. This isn't, I'm not quite sure, Caitlin, how to frame this question, so maybe you can help me out with it. But I noticed on your bulleted points when you were talking about economic implications, particularly in the aftermath of disasters, it got me to thinking to ask if you in your research, or if you maybe can anticipate the impact of having outside or external partners and agencies come into Appalachian communities to assist after a natural disaster, such as, the recent flooding in Kentucky. We've had a substantial flooding in Appalachia the last several years. And I know that the program that I work for in Kentucky has disaster relief as part of, the services that we provide. Do you have you found, or do you think that integration of services will help to reduce some of the stigma around asking for help with mental health or with finances or substance use disorder, just because my thought on that is like everybody's going through this together and there's additional resources instead of seeking that treatment in isolation. Is that, I said a lot, but I'm just wondering, because you had highlighted the economic issue, whether those resources coming in like after a natural disaster maybe assist with the reduction in stigma.
I think I understand your question. So, I'm not sure how much of an impact, each service coming from the outside can make. I guess it really depends on the program itself. Like maybe let's use like FEMA, for example, with the recent flooding that, Southeast Kentucky has experienced. Almost every single client that I talk to, they have a very negative view of FEMA because FEMA has done so little. And no doubt, it's a lot, from um, financial perspectives, but there's so much that needs to be undone. We're talking about generations of poverty. So, a lot of people who have lost their homes or their belongings in these floods, they got that home from their parents or from their grandparents. And, it was already maybe like paid off and, they didn't have to have the additional burden of a mortgage payment. And now they were still in poverty and now they've lost that. So it just really depends on what program it is and how effective they can be on their impact and making a difference in rural Appalachian economic distress because we're talking about generations of poverty here. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Myers, go ahead with your question.
Caitlin, I just had a quick question. Um, Wanted to kind of pick your brain. You were talking about the kind of cultural push against professional help, and I'm interested in your research if there was a theory behind, is that shame based? Is that, a fear of like law enforcement or social services interventions? Just a general lack of kind of trust in the medical communities? And then, as a second point, were there any best cases or best practices for having to kind of communicate out to communities to kind of break those barriers to increase the kind of prevalence of folks coming in for professional help?
Thank you, Brian. So, Um, a lot of times we're looking at the stigma surrounding mental health due to, like you said, a personal view of having to ask for help is a show of weakness, due to generations of rural Appalachians being taught that, you're just supposed to suck it up and rub some dirt in it, so to speak. And also there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. Religion is very, thick in these rural Appalachian communities, and that also stigmatizes mental health that, if you're having to ask for help from someone else, then you have a lack of spiritual faith. So we're working with a lot of different obstacles for that stigma for mental health. As far as in my research of what to do to help break it, is not looking at outsiders to try and convince this rural community to come talk to them. So maybe having like if we could get some people from rural Appalachia who have positive experiences with mental health services to maybe like be a spokesperson in the community, maybe even do an interview or something, because word of mouth referrals are everything in rural Appalachia because it is all about who you know around here. So I think that would be like a really good step in helping to break down that mental health stigma and get more people come into outpatient therapy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Atkins, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you. Caitlin, great presentation. So my question is, you talked about the importance of providers being culturally competent. But sometimes it's really hard to get providers in rural areas. And so we're having to telehealth providers from out of state or wherever we can get. So if that's what we have to do based on your research and everything that you've learned, what can we do to try to at least make them a little more competent?
Thank you, Ashley. So, the idea is to have a workshop, like a one-stop stop for cultural competence and going over those proposed cultural principles. that I developed in the conceptual paper. So that workshop could be done via telehealth. I mean, most things are now. That's the one good thing that did come out of the pandemic. So just having that one-stop shop or one-stop stop for cultural principle and learning about just kind of a lot of the stuff that has been included in this presentation today about the cultural stigma, the barriers that exist, how this has not just started with this one person, this has been going on for generations. And just kind of giving them, a bit more background about the community more than what they learn on social media or in movies, because it's a grossly misrepresentation of, the people who live in rural Appalachia. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ashley.
I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask? Okay. That will conclude our presentation for the day, but I want to say thank you for joining us. And I would like for everyone to please join me in congratulating Dr. Caitlin Marissa Warfield.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your presence today during this very nerve-wracking presentation for me. Thank you guys so much. Okay, I think I will end the meeting now.